we've got to the stage now where the GA have to nearly micromanage how they want football to look. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a hand-passing game. I think the same thing is going to happen with hurling. Hurling isn't going to turn, whatever little bits of negativity. And there'll be people watching this going, there's nothing wrong with hurling. Hurling is great. We don't want it to change. That's fine. If that's what you want, that's no bother. But there are, to me, in my opinion, there are issues with the game that aren't going to change organically. Rules are going to have to be brought to frame the game in a certain way. But as I say, the view out there is that hurling is fine. Don't touch it. Let it evolve the way it's evolving. And you know what? That's fine. It's sport at the end of the day. And if that's what the majority view is, off you go. But to me, there are aspects of the game I watch now and I go, I'm not interested in this.
Because the black card point of view, I think that's a lazy attempt at solving the issue. I always believe, like, if you're going to punish, it has to be on the scoreboard.
Sure.
If it's a clearly cynical foul, make that a 21-yard free, make it a penalty. I mean, obviously that's something that needs to be teased out and maybe tried out in trial games, whatever it is. I just think the black card is lazy, and when you bring that in, and most people in hurling think that that's been a disaster in football, and not because it hasn't cleaned up a certain amount of fouling, it has, like the body check fouls, those type of things.
Sure.
It's been great for that. The flip side is, 1 minute to go, I'm still going to rugby tackle you on the ground if you're through and go. There's no doubt about it. And it doesn't matter if there's 10 minutes off for the sin bin. It doesn't matter if, you have to be substituted like the old rule. It really just does not matter. Would you have been in favour of, well, look, the black card is bin now, and I think John Horan kind of said that. But what way would you like to see it change? Because I actually have a couple of thoughts on the way the game is evolving, actually, now that you mention it. But just to look at that in isolation for a second.
I think, I would have always been open to, even from the football side of things, the idea of a black ball, for example, so that if a cynical foul occurred in any part of the field, you get a 20-metre free up the other end. That was floated around. There's a lot of different variations on that. They went with a sin bin. Like, you're never going to rule out cynical play entirely. It's an impossible thing. And you're quite right. In the last minute of an All-Ireland final, Peter Canavan is still going to jump on Colm Cooper's back. Whatever. Someone, you're still going, if a tip forward is flying through on the Cork goalkeeper with a goal to win the game in an All-Ireland final, that man might not see Monday morning, and that's fine. That's natural, okay? That's fine. You're not going to, you can't legislate for human nature in that regard. But I think over the totality of a game, you can certainly make it a bit more flowing and a bit more true to itself. And I'm not, in terms of hurling, I'm not, advocating a return to ground hurling and we all play like we did in the 80s. But there's a certain, how would you put it? There's a certain identity to the physical exchanges in hurling that has been sort of changed, I suppose. It's just been changed. It's more of a collective thing. It's more of this bunching, for want of a better word, but this physical sort of mass tackling. And you can, we can go back and you can trace the roots of it, like all the way up from Cork in the early noughties, through the Kilkenny reaction to Cork, through to the Tipperary reaction to Kilkenny, through to Kilkenny's reaction to Tip, through to Clare, through to Cork's reaction again, and on and on and on and on, and to Limerick now, and to Galway as well in the middle of all that, to where we are, and Waterford as well. So, it's easy to trace how it occurred, and it's all to do with, in tandem with all of this, the skill levels have gone through the roof. It's never been as skillful a game. Shane O'Donnell scored a point there at the weekend that was just off the charts altogether. And that passes off as just a kind of a, that was a great point, move on to the next great point. We're in one regard, we're in a great era for hurling. It's like the competition is even better than the 90s in terms of competition. Skill-wise, never been higher. I just think that there are little aspects that can be tidied up. Is the sin bin the catch-all? It's not. Is the sort of, I suppose, the basketball type cynical foul straight away to 40-yard free or whatever? I'd always be open to that kind of stuff, I think it's absolutely something that could have been looked at. I couldn't tell you for sure why the Standing Rules Committee aren't in favour of that. Maybe they feel it's too draconian, or maybe they feel it just wouldn't get through. But I think there is an attitude. I wouldn't say, when you say there's an attitude within hurling, you're pulling in an awful lot of people. I would say there's an attitude, certainly within some very prominent pundits and within some prominent GA officials who have a hurling background, that hurling should not be touched. It cannot be touched. And by the way, it's not a new attitude. That's been the way for a long number of years, because it's such a precious game in so many ways.
Just in terms of how the game is evolving, like, when we talk about full-backs and we talked about, Colm Spillane and Owen Cadigan, I think we're gone very much to either a one-man or a two-man full-back line with other players floating off them.
Yes.
I think,
yes.
And everyone's trying to do that to isolate a brilliant player inside, and then the solution is, where can we find a Dahi Burke type player who has the athleticism to sort of match that? Because full-backs before, they were the sort of stand there and guard the square type of a player, bear in the square, whereas you possibly need to be the best athlete on the field now to play back there. Another thing is, because teams are sitting back so much when they don't have the ball, I find out that if you have the ball, you're playing a lot across your own 65 to try and find that space and then pick someone further up the field. So there's a sort of a patience in teams' play that we haven't seen before. And maybe the beauty of hurling, and that's romanticising it again, is always that you just let the ball do the work. You blast it up the field, let a guy win his own ball. I think those are just a couple of snippets of how the game has changed.
I think that would kind of tally with my own thoughts on it as well. And let the ball do the work. What's wrong with that? I mean, if you can make it work, but it's so hard to make it work now because the athleticism has come into hurling to such a degree that obviously the ball still travels faster than the man, but players can get around the field quicker, so they can cover spaces in that way that they can in football as well. Obviously, it's not the same, but it's kind of this. There's an awful lot has been brought over from football tactics, particularly in the first 10 years of this decade. That is now applicable in hurling.
That would be Kilkenny as much as anyone. Mick Dempsey's influence. Like I'm a firm believer that Kilkenny turned into a Gaelic football team with obviously a massive hurling. It's obviously hurling, but with huge Gaelic football influence.
They managed to mesh us. Like, if we want to go back and look at it historically speaking now, 15, 16 years ago, they managed to mesh that sort of attitude of you need to be able to win your own ball. And I mean, if you look at some of the deliveries from the Kilkenny backline against Cork, Galway in 04, 05, those, they were just skying them up they were just flinging them up the field. But you did have that thing where they all stepped back 20 yards. They looked at what Cork were doing with the short stick passing, the kind of the Newtown Shandrum approach, if you like. The hook, they're like Cork's technical play back in the noughties was outstanding because they had the players to do it. Kilkenny matched that by just marching everybody back about 10, 15 yards for the puck outs and challenging them to win their own ball and they monstered teams as a result. But they also obviously had some of the greatest hurlers of all time, which was very, very handy, which meant they could play it any which way you wanted. But that was, I mean, back that time, Mick Dempsey obviously was an influence. I think Mickey Harte was a huge influence on hurling because you had Brian Cody looking at Harte and he was a great admirer of what Tyrone did. So he saw that athleticism and he saw that sort of willing to work for each other, that sacrifice, and that smartness about matchups and about how you can unpick the opposition. And I mean, look, I think we're all fairly well agreed that when Kilkenny or Brian Cody in particular says there's no tactics in hurling, he may be speaking about a definition of tactics that isn't broadly similar to the rest of us. I mean, they've clearly changed the game for better in most ways. I mean, it's again, in terms of the GA, in terms of football, the GA have certainly tried, and you can see it if you take the rules that they've tried to bring in their totality, they are trying to bring some more chaos back to football, as in that you can have a tactical formation and structure, but that at the end of the day, there's still enough space in the game for 50-50 challenges, for high catching, for contesting. And that's good for the game. You don't want, I mean, what you get if you don't have that, what you get is what you just said there in hurling, back and forth across the field, lateral crab football, back and forth across the field. And my concern for hurling is that the same thing is coming in. That yes, you long for 50-50 competition because of the nature of the game. But that aspect of you say let the ball do the work. It's chaos. It's chaos as well. You let it go and see what happens. That's a lot of it is the beauty in hurling. A lot of that, I mean, when I see guys pucking the ball across the field waiting for guys to make runs and stuff, I mean, I know all the work that's gone into it, and I appreciate the effort and all. But as a spectator, I'm kind of looking at it going, at some stage the GA are going to have to actually make rules to make this more difficult, to make it more profitable for guys to get the ball and let it go.
Thanks for watching Our Game. Don't forget to like and share the videos, and if you're new to the channel, hit subscribe.